Welcome to the Adaptivity podcast. My name is Alexei Kravitsky and I'm your host. In this podcast series, we're going to meet thought leaders and practitioners from the field to learn more about adaptivity. And then we're going to go deep into specific practices that you can use in your organization, in your department, in your team to strive for a state of higher adaptivity. Stay with us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Adaptivity podcast. And today with me is a special guest, Bas Vodde, from his library in Amsterdam.
Hey.
Hey. Is it how you greet people in Amsterdam?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I guess so.
Okay. Because you spend all the time in a library, you don't know how to greet people. Right?
Yeah, I don't greet people anymore.
That's what I thought. So, because it is Adaptivity podcast, I have to ask this question in the beginning. Bas, what is your definition of adaptivity? And is it the same as adaptiveness and adaptability? Can we use all these three words interchangeably? If yes, what would be the definition?
I guess yes. And I don't know. To me, I'm kind of sad that we have to use the word adaptiveness nowadays, because to me it seems to just be the original purpose of agile development. And to me, when I was introduced to agile development around at 2001, that was the key point. We're going to try to build products that are of higher value to our customers, and we know that they'll change their mind. So when they change their mind, then we'll stop saying, "Hey, but you told us to build this," and instead we say, "Oh, we're happy you learned something, and share that with us. Let us change so that we'll build a better product for you."
Right.
And to me, that was just agility, and it is kind of unfortunate that um, agile development has seems to have become almost quite meaningless. I mean, it's almost equal to we use Jira nowadays, and people still working completely independent. I was visiting a company a couple of years ago, and working with one of the team members, and he was working on his Jira ticket alone, and was preparing 2 sprints ahead for the rest of his team when they're also going to work on the same. And after he closed the Jira ticket, he pushed it to a branch so that the QA people could test it. And that is what agile development was to him, and that has nothing to do anymore with what I always consider to be the essence of agile development. So
I see.
now we'll get back to adaptiveness, which was one of the original words that was an alternative for agile development when the manifesto was signed.
Mm-hmm. And if I ask you to give a brief, crispy description or definition of adaptivity, what that would be?
It would be focusing on maximizing value to customers, and in order to do so, being able to change your direction, respond to whatever changes for your customer or their situation or your organization.
Okay. Sounds like a very generic attribute, if you say, of any organization that wants to stay relevant to its customers and stakeholders. Do you believe, Bas, that every organization really needs high state of adaptivity, or it is just for some?
That's a more difficult question, I think, than you'd assume. Because on one hand, yes, I think every organization would need adaptiveness. But then on the other hand, there might be situations when, for whatever reason, truly the um, context and situation of a customer doesn't actually change.
Hmm.
Um, Yet still at that point you might not need the goal of adaptiveness, but the practices that it comes with to achieve that
Hmm.
are probably still useful, because a lot of those practices are about uh, risk reduction, working incremental, and improving feedback loops, which
Hmm.
are kind of the essential abstract tools in order to
Right.
achieve adaptiveness. And that would still be useful probably in virtually every product development situation.
Okay, so just to rephrase that, how I hear what you say, you're saying that it's not necessary that every organization has this goal of being adaptive, but the practices that can be used and are used in this regard, they will be helpful and healthy for any software product development organization. Is it the way you said it?
I think so, yeah.
While staying on the topic of definitions, you don't have to be introduced to our audience, but just to make it explicit, you are co-creator of the LeSS and large scale Scrum. And I don't know if I should say framework or just large scale Scrum. So my question is how you define LeSS large scale Scrum. Is it a framework or two frameworks? Is it the journey? Is it the perfection state, the path, the journey, the method, everything together? And if it is everything together, with it seems to me like this, what is it then?
It's funny that you're asking it now, because me and Craig have last week been working on updating the
Oh,
why less page on the less side, because we
okay.
looked at it and decided that it it sucks, and it doesn't really reflect why less in a good way.
Mm,
Um, so while we were rewriting, then we referred to less as an organizational system,
mm,
and that's kind of it, and that triggered quite a lot of discussion within the group of trainers that were
mm-hmm.
reviewing the rewrite of the why less page. And we might change it to an organization design system. Um,
Yeah, that's more like this to me. Yeah.
and it's we're not using the word framework anymore.
Mm,
Framework was kind of hard, because we uh, often looked at less using the less complete, what we call the less complete picture, which is the
mm-hmm.
combination of experiments and experimental mindset,
Yeah.
the rules, the principles, and the guides. And then the rules and the framework we kind of used intertwined in the past.
Okay.
So therefore, if you call less a framework, it has always been kind of ambiguous on whether you then refer to the less rules, or less as a whole. So the
Mm,
combination of those four. And to clarify that, we're just moving away from framework completely and start using less rules instead of using framework.
mm,
And
okay.
then we're thinking of something like organizational design system for the combination of the experiments, the guides, the rules,
Mm,
and the 10 principles.
okay. That's interesting. And I think it's a very fresh and exciting for our viewers to be the first one to hear about those upcoming changes. I thought you guys use less to name everything, the system, the framework, as a funny way just to minimize the usage of words and mean more things with less words. But I think it might have created a bit of confusion more than fun.
Yeah, it's not just that. Also,
Hmm.
especially when we formulated LeSS as large-scale Scrum in 2015, at that point we had a discussion about whether we want to be close to Scrum or
Hmm.
kind of be separated from Scrum.
Yeah.
I mean, both me and Craig um, were Scrum trainers at that time. We've
Yeah.
been only influenced by Scrum and Scrum thinking and the empiricism and inspect and adapt loops
Yeah.
and trying to create kind of this minimum structure.
Hmm.
Um, but when we formulated the less rules, one of the big questions was, okay, are we going to kind of stick to to Scrum, or do we make less completely independent of Scrum?
Yeah.
And during that time, Craig more leaned towards making less independent from Scrum,
Mm.
and I leaned more towards linking it a bit more to Scrum. And since we linked it to Scrum, it also felt natural to talk about a framework or
Yeah.
two frameworks because it kind of just mapped to Scrum at that time. Um, Maybe that was the right thing to do at the time, but I don't think it's right now because less is very different than Scrum, where Scrum s- stays with, if you wish, the framework and some philosophy behind that.
Yes.
Less does a lot more than that because it talks about organizational design,
Mm.
structure of the teams, etc.
Correct.
And therefore, I think it's good to gradually move a little bit away from that, and
Mm.
n-
Yeah.
gradually not using the word framework is one of the things to try to signal that this change is happening.
Nice. I wish Scrum has been also evolving in this direction, but I think it will just be a framework forever now.
It's been evolving. It's just not Scrum anymore now.
It's not the Scrum we used to know. Let's put it this way. All right. So it seems like you guys are undergoing some stage of rethinking, right? The your initial thoughts and words under less, which were from 2015, you said, which is like 7, 8 years ago, to minimize confusion and to add clarity. I wonder if you can recall some maybe funny slash sad misunderstandings or misapplications or misuses, abuses of LeSS that you have encountered hearing or seeing different companies trying to implement the LeSS framework?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're funny,
Funny, sad.
but um, yeah, very much related to the discussion we just had.
Uh-huh.
And also partly related to the name Large Scale Scrum, which is the original meaning of the LESS acronym. Um, Unfortunately, often people, when they start using Scrum and they have more than one team, then a common thing is we hear is, oh, there we are now implemented less.
Hmm.
So a common misunderstanding is that less is simply Scrum done by two teams in parallel or something,
Hmm.
uh, and kind of missing the point that there's a lot more to less than that.
Hmm.
So I think that that is one of the most common misunderstandings. And then, of
Hmm.
course, and I think you've seen that also is the that one is perhaps funny is the application of less huge to like a four team
Yes.
lesser option where they call the team product owner the area product
Yeah.
owner and the team backlog the area backlog, and that's obviously a big misunderstanding, but common.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen those small, tiny, less huge adoptions, if you can call it that way. I wonder if the updated materials you guys are working on are going to also clarify, because you said you're going away from frameworks to rules, and before you had two frameworks, less and less huge. So how is the less huge is going to be now? Just as a rule, like if you have more than do these, if less, or
Yeah, in a way, it's the same. I mean, it's just the wording that we're moving away from,
okay,
because if you look at the rules, they're already split into the less or the basic less rules and the less huge rules as an extension to that.
yeah,
And it always said very explicitly, do not move to um, less huge when you don't have, say, 8 teams or
it
so.
does. Still, people, I guess. All right, so that has been a the fresh view on less as just a set of rules, I guess, that are define what you said, org design system. I think I like it a lot now, if I think more about this. So, going to another topic where I would like us to have a little bit deeper discussion, if you will. So, I know you've been doing this talk recently, and you're planning to do more talks at different meetups around the world on this topic, which is around the term interdependence. I think the full name is interdependence with dependent teams, or dependency with interdependent teams.
Maximizing dependencies with
With
interdependencies.
interdependent teams, right? So,
Yeah.
just to start with, could you explain to our audience what is this interdependence that you believe we should be striving for?
Um, well, the interdependence is uh, triggered by um, the common drive with agile development to try to create independent teams.
Yeah, autonomous, right?
Well,
Or
that's where it gets kind of funny, and that's where the words are often used the same, but they actually mean different things,
mm-hmm,
right? So, and often people think that independent and autonomous teams mean the same thing.
mm-hmm,
But to me, they don't really mean the same thing.
or
I don't think autonomous means in that sense separation.
mm-hmm,
It just means that you don't need to wait for another team to make a certain decision, but you can make your decision yourself,
okay,
right? Whereas independent is often more used as a synonym of isolation,
okay,
right? Where we are trying to make sure that what one team is working on is not related to what the other teams are working on, so that they, in the most extreme case, they don't need to talk to each other, or
mm-hmm,
even worse than that, they create team APIs that you need to use to talk to each other. Terrible ideas, and that's what's going on. It's people are promoting this idea of team isolation and then
mm-hmm,
using the architecture to try to formalize the interfaces between teams. Right? And especially the interdependence is a reaction towards that. Whereas we do want the teams to be autonomous in the sense that they don't need to wait for other teams to make their decision. They don't need to be blocked by other teams, but they're still working on the same product. And since they're working on the same product, as long as they work on customer features, they will not map exactly to whatever architecture we imagine. So
right,
therefore, the idea of creating teams that are not blocked with other teams is a great idea, but the idea of trying to formalize the dependencies or interfaces between teams is not such a good idea. You want your teams to actually work together during a sprint because they can learn from each other. It's fun to work together across multiple teams, and it is on the same product. And once we isolate them, you'll be able to actually see that in the product itself. You'll see the different opinions and habits of the different teams.
Okay.
I would say independence is most of the time interpreted as isolated or formalized dependencies between the teams.
Okay.
Where autonomous would refer to whether you can work without being blocked or making decisions or waiting for decisions from other teams. So in that sense, autonomous is something that you probably want,
Hmm.
but then independence in the sense of formalized dependencies or isolation is something you don't want.
So your talk is called maximizing dependencies with
Yes.
interdependent teams.
Yeah.
Is there
So
some? Yeah.
the interdependence we just explained, and then the
Exactly.
maximizing dependencies takes that one step further,
Yes.
where the teams are purposely looking for maximizing the amount of collaboration that happens during one sprint. So when you have a top of a backlog and there's, say, three related items on the top of the backlog,
Yes.
then you can have all these three items be selected by one team in which you're trying to um, minimize the dependencies or minimize the collaboration between the teams, or you can choose that each of these items are given to a different team and they work very closely together during that sprint.
Hmm.
And maximizing dependencies refers to that second way of working, where you're trying to maximize the shared work between the teams so that you have the maximum collaboration within the sprint between the teams.
Hmm. I believe I know what you mean because I also attended one of your early talks on this idea at the last conference last year. But I believe that maximization of dependencies without really understanding what you mean, it sounds really scary and I guess counterintuitive for the majority of people who hear this statement the first time. Was
Yeah.
it done on a purpose to scare people away from that idea, or it's just the best way you can formulate, or just a humor of yours?
Um, it's not for scaring people away. I wouldn't want to scare people away,
Okay.
but I think it is an phrase that when you hear it, it feels like, mm,
Makes you think and wonder
yeah, and I
and
wonder
want to know more, right?
why you would want to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe a better way of saying it would be maximizing cross-team collaboration during a sprint, or
Yeah.
maximizing shared work causing cross-team collaboration during the sprint.
Mm.
But it's not this nice, short,
It's not that crispy.
thought-provoking sentence. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not for scaring them away, but at least for
Mhm.
um, thinking about it a bit longer.
Okay. So the more I learn about LeSS, right, and I've been on this journey for quite some time, and I'm still a journeyer. Also, actually, in the regards of simple plain Scrum, I'm still learning a lot how to actually use it or explain it properly. So this is a very fresh thought to me that you really want a lot of teams to work together on a small set of items that they select for a sprint. Um, so would you say if if the teams think they do less, right, and they select different items, and they will try to minimize dependencies and minimize collaboration, because I guess they would say the less we talk to the others, the more time we have to do our work.
Yeah.
That goes exactly to the wrong side of what you guys are trying to achieve with LeSS. You really want the teams to work very closely together, ideally just on one item, all the teams.
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
think it's more related to how much experience the teams have using less. And
Okay, so it's a level of
in
maturity, fluency in LeSS.
Yeah, maybe. I'm hesitant to use the phrase maturity
I know
because it, um,
it's bad.
it
It's been bad.
it's not bad, but the lower end is immature, which has
Yeah. Okay, I agree.
a negative connotation with it.
Okay.
Um, but teams that just start with less, they almost always end up you know um, trying to in their sprint planning get the related items to one team to avoid the collaboration across the teams.
Yeah.
But you can't always do that when you're purely picking up the items on the product backlog from customer value perspective. It will happen that, for example, 60-70% of the items are related to one larger topic,
Hmm.
and then you can choose, and that's often what the teams then say is like, oh, but we can't work efficient when we're all working on related work. Um, and that's the underlying assumption that many teams have. And then you can choose to um, change the priority of the backlog based on your teams, or say, well, try to find a way to work effectively with multiple teams on similarly related items. And by doing so, we discovered that teams can work effective on similarly or closely related items very well, and that it
Hmm.
tends to bring the teams a lot closer together. They get almost become like one team. I often describe it as the the cross team way of working is almost equal to the in team way of working. Right? It's never equal. Teams will still have their own work habits and identities, and also their processes around that, like
Hmm.
dailies, etc. But the difference, the level of trust, if you wish, cross team becomes almost the same as in team. And that, as long as you combine that with things like continuous integration, because without continuous integration it becomes very hard, um, then uh, teams find that they can work very effectively on closely related items. And of course, that achieves the goal of adaptiveness a lot better.
Okay, thanks for this insightful and deep discussion, Bas. To start wrapping up this talk, let's look into the future, right? I know that for several years ago, you have been working as a developer in a team, and now you're out and you seem to have more time to refactor the less texts on the less website, which is probably very timely.
To clarify a bit what I did the previous years, so basically for the last, I guess, 20 years, every now and then I do like to jump in a team and uh, just work as a team member, get to know the more modern technology, become the Kubernetes expert, and things like that. Um, I do think Kubernetes is a very relevant change in thinking and development. So I did that the previous 2 years, also during the COVID time, to learn more about um,
The pain of
if,
remote
if
work.
if it still sucks to work remotely, and the conclusion is it still sucks to work remotely.
Yeah.
Um, and I stopped with that somewhere half last year, and since then been refocusing a little bit on the less trainers community, less community, um, writing the case study that I've been working on for 5 years already, and we really want to get that out this year. It's 200 plus pages already. It's basically a new book. um, I'll be doing a bit more courses. We'll be in Munich in a couple of months, and also the LeSS conference in Berlin looks like it will be um, similar to the LeSS conference in Munich a couple of years ago, pre COVID. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, that's. I'll have two clients that I can't resist, and I'll be probably working with them a bit. One is involved in, or one is at the point where they're changing from less to less huge, and then another one that I like a lot. I hope you'll be able to hear more about that. Um, and client that is about to adopt less because they want their developers to work directly with customers. That is the main selection criteria for choosing less, which I think is wonderful.
I
So I'll
think
be
it's I think it's wonderful too.
I think we'll be working with them a bit too, and try not to get too involved this time, so that I won't drop all
Yeah,
the other things.
keep your hands away from the code.
Uh,
We'll see for that, I guess.
at least most of the time.
Most of the time.